Well, good afternoon to you, Unati, and to the viewers as well. And of course, as you say, lots of catch-up as we've seen throughout the day, and even various officials of the ANC coming out to say that, now this is where proceedings are. We are in plenary, we are in discussions. This particular report has been tabled, and remember that organizational report by the Deputy President also mainly looking to see what it contains. There's also the financial report. There's also that, those all-important reports by the Integrity Commission. But I am with an NEC member of the ANC who I'm going to pose that very question to, just to get a sense of this catch-up process. How far is it right now? Mr. Hanekom, thank you so much for your time. Welcome to SABC.
Thanks so much. Let's
talk about where things stand right now inside.
Well, I mean, you've more or less captured it. Obviously, it's a pity. It's unfortunate that the conference took such a long time to get going because of challenges at the point of registration, which took far longer than was anticipated. But once it got going, apart from a little moment when people were obviously trying to disrupt the president, it's been very smooth. I've just sat through the presentation, the Deputy President's presentation on the organizational report delivered by the Deputy President. Complete silence and good behavior on the part of all of the delegates. So somewhere the provincial leaders, elected provincial leaders, have spoken to their delegates, and they're keeping it under control. And so far it seems to be running very smoothly, very.
I'm going to ask you a question that's probably going to put you on the spot. Let's talk about the Deputy President's report. Are you satisfied as an NEC member of what is contained in there?
Well, I had better be satisfied, because he doesn't just present his own written report. He didn't write it himself. This is a report approved by ourselves in the NEC. So we are very satisfied with what is contained in that report. Are we satisfied with everything that has happened over the last 5 years? Well, obviously not. We want to be better. We want to improve. But we believe it was an honest report of the various developments, positive and not so positive, over the last 5 years. Good report. Yes, I'm completely satisfied.
I know the media is not allowed when this particular session happens, but I'm not going to not ask you that, as you are reflecting and talking about this report, talking about the good and the bad, and of course there has been a mixed bag of that. What was your biggest takeaway?
For me, it's not my takeaway from the report. That's neither here nor there.
Just as an NEC member.
Yeah, what is more important is my own takeaway on the challenges that we've experienced over the last 5 years, the goods and the bads. I think, notwithstanding many difficulties, bearing in mind some of the divisions at the NASREC conference, and the fact that we were clearly not all of one mind on this NEC, so it's been a difficult 5-year period. Having said that, it doesn't mean that there weren't serious advances and good decisions taken, but they were always quite difficult, because even some of the most basic decisions that were in keeping with ANC resolutions, conference resolutions, which bind us, for example, on the step-aside rule, the fact that it took us so long and that there were so many debates and discussions and so much opposition within the NEC, well, that held us back. But at the end of the day, the right decision was taken and implemented even when it came to highest office in the ANC. So, those are some of the reflections on this period of the NEC that are positive reflections. Has it been easy? Well, no, it hasn't been easy, but I've been on the NEC for 28 years. The last 5 years were not easy either. In fact, in some ways, they were more difficult, the previous 5 years.
And I'll get to some of the issues around the president in just a moment, but there has been a sentiment, listening to, your fellow NEC member, Nomvula Mokonyane, saying that in an interview with SABC News that this is the weakest NEC ever. I listened again today to another interview that Tony Engeli did with Natasha Piri just this afternoon. He says this is the weakest and the most divided NEC of the ANC. You listen to Panyaza Lesufi, the chair of Gauteng. He says this NEC has done nothing, when it comes to the issues around the electoral decline. He says that this particularly symbolizes a very weak NEC. How do you respond to that, and how much of a responsibility do you take as an NEC member as well?
Well, I mean, firstly, one shouldn't just be defensive of things that are being said, but I do take it from whence it comes. So when somebody like Tony Yengeni says it, then I have to say Tony Yengeni is part of the reason why this NEC wasn't what it ought to have been. Some of his own behavior, he simply, for a period of months, he didn't come. I've never said this before, it's never been communicated before, but for a period of months, he simply didn't attend. He's a member of the National Working Committee, he didn't attend it. Until he wanted to raise his issues, then suddenly he appeared again. So, and some of his public statements, and especially the most recent public statements, when people go on public platforms demanding that the president should resign, attacking the president, aligning himself with groups of thugs, really, those are the things that made this NEC difficult. Because you had people there that were sort of hell-bent on the NEC approving wrong things, the NEC not doing the right things, standing in the way of this NEC doing what it is meant to do. So this is to some extent, and I don't want to get personal, but because of the kinds of comments they made about the NEC, they seem to not take any responsibility themselves for some of the weaknesses that were in the NEC. And I'm going a bit further. I'm saying that some of them were major contributors to the challenges that were confronted by the NEC.
And I wish we had more time. I'm told we're just about to wrap. But when we then look at what is also coming out in the public domain, though, to suggest that there's a mafia-style approach to this NEC, I'm sure you've seen some of those reports. It also then begs the question as to how free is everyone to speak in this particular NEC, and coupled with that, some have expressed that this NEC is not really holding the president to account when it comes to issues of Phala, especially with how he's dealt with it so far. And you look at the parliamentary process, but ahead of that, there were some NEC members who say you were not asking the questions you were supposed to be asking.
That who was not asking the questions?
The NEC was not asking the questions that it needed to ask. Instead, it allowed him to deal with it all on his own when it should have started asking the tough questions early on. How do you then respond to all of this? Okay,
well, firstly, that's just wrong. That's a distortion. We have such long debates. In that particular instance where people said, but, we weren't given an opportunity to speak, the person who was in the public domain saying we were not given the opportunity to speak had spoken in that discussion. 55 people, Gwede Mantashe said that. 55 people spoke during that debate, and there was a kind of a consensus emerging. And the chair, as a chair should do, was starting to wrap it up, to say, look, these are areas, and by the way, we were running out of time. And so, you just cannot go on forever. So back to your earlier question, the freedom of people to speak at this NEC. Let me say, in this NEC, there's been much greater sense of freedom, partly because of Cyril Ramaphosa's leadership, and that he's never intimidating. Compared to the last NEC, when we raised criticisms of the then serving president, we were threatened. People were afraid of criticizing the then president. Nobody is afraid in this NEC of asking questions. Nobody is afraid of criticizing. We have differences, and we have robust debates, but there isn't an atmosphere of people being afraid to express their views. Not at all. And we're out of time. I'm just going to steal 5 seconds of your time then. There are some who are saying you're being hard on those who voted differently in Parliament because, there are some like you who found themselves in a position when you were critical of the government of the day a few years ago. So then others are saying, why are you treating the ones who voted in Parliament differently now to what you did, what was done with, when you were deviating as well? Yeah, I'm afraid I can't answer that in 10 seconds. Because it's a
Let's try.
No, well, I won't even try to answer it in 10 seconds, but it's disingenuous and opportunistic. Because 5 years ago, some of us were not critical of government. We were critical of a person who had been charged with corruption. We were critical of a person who was exposed in the Public Protector's report on expenditure on Nkandla. And so I can go on. And so being critical, as I say, when we were critical in the NEC, and we were certainly not making the kinds of public statements. I, for one, never publicly said, this president must resign, President Jacob Zuma. I said it in the NEC. Yeah. And when it came to the vote, and the motion of no confidence, there is no evidence whatsoever because it was a secret ballot. If there was any evidence or acknowledgement of having done what is against the rules of the ANC, why was I not charged at the time by an NEC led by Jacob Zuma?
All right.
So it's utterly disingenuous, frankly.
I wish we had more time, but thank you for stopping by, and hopefully we have another conversation again. That's NEC member Derek Hanekom.